All right. Hi, everyone. Can you all see and hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So I'm joining you from outside because I thought it was such a lovely day today. And I don't feel like running from Taranga Commons and to my office and back. It's quite a trip because I have classes all over the place. And as you know, last time I taught from my office. So we'll take advantage of the lovely weather while we can. So today we're going to get into the first chapter of Crumley, which is all about skepticism. We're going to learn about what skepticism is, um, and what the concerns of the skeptic mean for the prospect of having knowledge. So we'll focus primarily on the skeptical concerns of René Descartes today. We'll save the stuff on David Hume for next time. All right. So if I were to ask you, what do you know? You'd probably reply that you know lots and lots of different things. I mean, we all feel like we know lots and lots of different things, don't we? Yeah, Descartes, the dualism guy, substance dualism. Today we're not so much concerned with that, but that is one of his claims to fame, certainly. So that's a really great example, right? Actually, Finn, you know that Descartes is the dualism guy, right? Um, Now a skeptic would say, hang on, you might believe that. Your belief might even be true, but it might not rise to the epistemic standards that are required for knowledge. That's the concern of the skeptic. So a skeptic would say, like, whatever you think you know, you probably know a bit less than you think. That's probably a healthy attitude for all of us to adopt, right? A sort of epistemic humility. We probably know far less than we think we do. Some skeptics will go farther and say, well, we don't actually know anything at all. We might have true beliefs, okay, and that's great, but none of those true beliefs meet the standards required for knowledge. That's the concern of the skeptic. Crumley defines skepticism as follows on page 2. He says that skepticism is the view that we do not have knowledge or justified beliefs in some area. Now, this word has taken on an interesting sort of different meaning, a meaning different to its original meaning. The original sort of meaning of the word comes from skepsis, which I've got transliterated here, and I've also given you the Greek in case you're curious about that. Skepsis, from classical Greek, which means to investigate or to inquire. Nowadays, when we talk about skepticism, we talk about skeptics, they sound like people who just doubt things, right? I mean, are you familiar with the sort of skepticism I'm sort of gesturing at here? Kind of a scientific skepticism, right? The sort of skepticism that some people will use to counter extraordinary or anomalous claims. Like, imagine if I told you that I saw a ghost, right? You might be a little bit skeptical. You might say, did you really? Or were you maybe seeing things, right? So you're being a skeptic in the sense of being a doubter of my claim of having seen a ghost. But originally, skepsis, just means to investigate or to inquire. What are we investigating? What are we inquiring about? Well, whether our beliefs, our true beliefs, even our well-justified true beliefs, meet the standards that are required to count as knowledge. So that's what, traditional skeptics are concerned with. There's a variety of different kinds of skepticism too. Um, so a global skeptic would say that none of our beliefs count as knowledge. So we have all kinds of beliefs. Some of those beliefs might be true, but none of them count as knowledge. That's a little bit extreme, right? Then we have partial skepticism. Some of our beliefs could be knowledge, but not all of them are. I could have true beliefs that, I don't know, they just happen to be true, but maybe they're not justified in the right way. I don't have good enough reasons for having that belief, for that belief to count as knowledge. That's another form of skepticism. The big two are academic skepticism and Pyrrhonian skepticism. Academic skepticism kind of, it's that Socratic virtue, right? We only know one thing, and that's that we don't know anything. That's academic skepticism. And that's due, I think, to the tradition of Socrates and Plato, right? I mean, actually, let me put the question to you. Who among you has read Plato's Apology? Okay, so some of you haven't, some of you have. Even if you haven't read it, you might be familiar with the premise, right? Socrates, an ancient Athenian philosopher, is tried by a jury of his peers, of other sort of Athenian citizens who would have been older property owning men. He was being tried on the charges of impiety and corrupting the youth. So, people in ancient Athens thought, hey, this Socrates guy, he's going around, he doesn't believe in any of the gods we believe in. He's corrupting the youth. He's acting like a sophist, a sort of philosopher who goes around teaching you whatever you want as long as you can pay up. And so he's put on trial. And during this trial, um, when they're dealing with the charge of sophistry, it's mentioned that Socrates' friend Chaerephon had visited the Oracle of Delphi. So you'd go to the Oracle and receive an oracle. These were these women who hung out in a place called Delphi, and you could go to them. And the story goes is they could receive an oracle from, the gods, from Apollo, right? And they could tell you something about yourself or about your future or something, right? And so Socrates' friend visits the oracle, and the oracle says, "Yeah, your friend Socrates, he's the wisest of men." And everybody hears about this. Oh, Socrates, the wisest of men. He must be some kind of a sophist if he thinks that. And Socrates replied by saying, "If I'm wiser, it is only by this trifle, that uh, that what I do not know, I do not think I know." Right? That's kind of the gist of academic skepticism. The one thing that we know is that we do not know. We do not know anything. Another skeptical tradition from ancient Greece is Pyrrhonian skepticism, right? And that's named after Pyrrho of Elis, who lived during this time, 360 to 270 BCE. It was advocated for by a Roman philosopher called Sextus Empiricus, which is a really interesting name. Um, Basically, Pyrrhonian skepticism calls for you to suspend any judgment or suspend any belief unless some proposition is completely evident to you. And by doing this, you can live a happier life because you're not uh, worried, I guess, about what is true and what is false. So a proposition, I might say to you, it's very sunny out here where I am in front of, well, it looks like I'm in front of Russell House and Grenville House over here, kind of near Residence Commons, or what, Taranga Commons, what used to be called Residence Commons. I say, oh, it's so nice and sunny out here. That's a proposition, okay? Propositions are sentences about the world. And by the world, I mean everything, not just, the planet Earth. I could say a proposition like the moon orbits the Earth, um, the Earth orbits the sun, um, the solar system exists within the Milky Way galaxy, right? So when I say the world, I don't just mean the planet Earth, I mean the whole of existence. So propositions are statements about the world, and they can have a truth value. Basically, that means they can be true or false. So I say to you, it's sunny outside here in on the Carleton campus by Taranga Commons. That's a proposition. It could be true, it could not be true. Now, you want to withhold your judgment on whether that is true until it's completely evident to you, if you're a Pyrrhonian skeptic. Um, so you might say, well, look at Professor Redstone's camera. It sure looks like it's sunny. But hang on, Professor Redstone could be lecturing from some kind of secret movie studio that's maybe just making it appear that it's sunny outside. Maybe it's not sunny outside. Maybe I'm not even here where I claim to be, right? So maybe you venture out of the lecture and you wander over here and you see for yourself, oh, there's Professor Redstone sitting there lecturing in the sunshine. That's completely evident to me that that is the case. Okay, now I can believe that. Now I'm okay saying I know that it's sunny outside, right? It's a bit of a roundabout example, but that gives you the idea. Um, Now Descartes, who's our philosopher of the day, if you like, was very influenced by Pyrrhonian skepticism, and that's because Descartes was writing during the early modern period. So, kind of like right immediately after the Renaissance, when there was a sort of rediscovery of all of this ancient Greek philosophy in Europe. It's not like there hadn't been any philosophy being done in Europe during the Middle Ages. It's just that it was mostly Aristotle. So a lot of this ancient stuff got rediscovered by Europeans because it had sort of been curated by Islamic scholars in the Middle East. So, after the Roman Empire falls and Europe enters the so-called Dark Ages, or a better term is the Middle Ages, because, the Dark Ages weren't all that dark. While that's going on in Europe, there's a sort of enlightenment going on in the Middle East, in Dar al-Islam, the home of Islam, right? And they're reading Plato, they're reading Aristotle, they're reading everybody. And they're curating and preserving all of this knowledge. And eventually it makes its way back to Europe. People like Descartes encounter it, and it influences their thinking. And as a result of that, influenced the unfolding of the scientific revolution. So that's a cool little bit of intellectual history. Now, how is it that we evaluate beliefs, right? Oh, okay. Actually, William, question.
Sorry, I just had a question about like when they say we don't know anything, like is that relative or is it kind of bringing into question what knowledge itself is? Because like objectively, like I know that the grass is green or something like that, right? So like what does it mean when they say that? You know what I mean? Like is it that we don't know anything because there's too much to know? Or, I just
It
I'm not
has
quite sure about
it has to do it's a good question. It has to do with the second thing you mentioned. Uh what counts as knowledge, right? The skeptics' standards for what counts as knowledge might be so high that none of our beliefs count as knowledge, right? You might say, "Oh, I can look at the grass and see it's green." But an extreme skeptic could say, "Well, you might be hallucinating, right? Or you might be dreaming." Um, and therefore your belief that the grass is green is false. So it has to do with these epistemic standards, which is what we're about to talk about right now. Um, so we need to know how we evaluate beliefs. Oh boy, there's lots of wasps out this time of year. They're flying around me. Or are they? I don't know. Go away, wasp. So what are epistemic standards? These are the standards that we use to determine when a true belief rises to meet the standards that are required of knowledge, or rather, this is how we set the standard of what counts as knowledge, right? We assign all of our beliefs different epistemic status. And epistemic, I've been using that word a lot. What does it mean? Epistemic, epistemology, all of these related words come from episteme. Episteme means knowledge or understanding, right? So we've got all kinds of beliefs. Some of our beliefs might count as instances of knowledge, others might not, right? we have all kinds of beliefs. And by the way, knowledge on the received view is just a well-justified true belief, right? So let's get that out of the way. Let's say that's our working definition of what knowledge is, a well-justified true belief. There's an epistemic standard. Now you have all kinds of beliefs. I have all kinds of beliefs. Some of those beliefs are likely to be false. Some of them are true, but may not count as knowledge. And some of those true beliefs do meet the epistemic standards required of knowledge, right? So what's a false belief that I hold? Hmm. I just can't think of any. No, I'm kidding. I'm sure I have some false beliefs. Um, oh, was there a hand that went up there briefly?
I know, I was just thinking of an example, but you have one, so.
Oh, well, Okay, I've got one. I believe that I have no false beliefs is itself more than likely a false belief, right? I probably have false beliefs. I'm probably mistaken about something. Um, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Um, but the belief, if you believe that you have no false beliefs, that's almost certainly a false belief because we all have false beliefs. Um, we can have true beliefs that might not count as knowledge, right? Think about it. I believe that uh, alien life exists somewhere in the universe, right? Now that could be false. It could be that planet Earth is the only is the only planet, excuse me, with life. Then again, it could be true, right? The universe is such a vast place, full of the ingredients for life, that it would be very surprising if life did not exist somewhere out there beyond the planet Earth. And let's say that it's true, right? Maybe there are aliens out there somewhere, or maybe it's just, some kind of weird creatures living in the icy oceans of one of Jupiter's moons or something, right? Um, okay, if that's the case, then my belief is true, but it doesn't count as knowledge, right? Caleb?
Does that mean like opinions are false beliefs?
Opinions could be false beliefs or they could be true beliefs, but opinions are never knowledge. Yeah. Opinions come, so the Greek for opinion is doxa, which can also just mean true belief, but it doesn't mean knowledge. To have knowledge, you have to have a certain level of certainty, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, and then Srivat-san, go ahead.
So, my question is, if you have to have a level of certainty, like what level does it need to be? Because I feel like you can't be 100% certain about anything, right? So I'm like looking at you on the screen right now. Again, how do I know that this isn't a dream, right? Because you don't know when you're dreaming,
Right.
right? So what if this is a dream and that I'm not actually here? I'm actually in, I don't know, a brain suspended in a vat.
Yeah.
So I'm just asking, what level of certainty do you need to have to for sure determine something?
Well, the received view, as I mentioned a moment ago, and this actually goes all the way back to Plato, is that knowledge is a well-justified true belief. So, for a belief to count as knowledge, the belief firstly has to be true, and I have to have some good reasons for holding the belief. Now, where the sort of quibbling happens is what counts as a good enough reason, right? Some people would accept, oh, I can see it like with my own eyes. I am like sort of in direct sensory contact with the grass here, so I can see that it's green, and that's good enough. But others, maybe like yourself, might say, well, no, that's not good enough because I could be dreaming, or I could be hallucinating, or I could be in a brain in a vat, right? Um, so and those people that quibble about that, those are the skeptics, right? uh, for the extreme skeptics, like for the global skeptics, there's nothing that you can offer that will ever justify a true belief enough that it counts as knowledge. Um, okay, so Pranil and then Srivatsan again.
So where do unfalsifiable beliefs fit in this? Because you mentioned like your belief that aliens exist. Well, with the current tools we have, you can't prove that true or false. So where do those sorts of beliefs fall in that spectrum?
Uh, well, they would just remain beliefs. The only way that we could know, for example, whether there's alien life is if we find it, right? We send a probe somewhere or we receive a message from someone, right? Uh, so it's not exactly completely unfalsifiable, but it would be difficult to do. Then again, falsifiable propositions, falsifiable hypotheses. This is dealing more with what we call a posteriori knowledge, knowledge that we gain with sense experience. There are some beliefs that we could call a priori beliefs or analytic beliefs that are definitionally true, right? Like triangles have three sides, right? If you ever see a triangle with four sides, no, because that wouldn't be a triangle, right? Um, so I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Um, there's some questions in the chat too, but I think I might deal with them in a moment. So Srivatsan, go ahead.
Okay, so you mentioned that I think one of my questions kind of relate to one in the chat, regarding René Descartes. You mentioned the global skeptics were like you can't know anything at all for certain, but didn't Descartes think that you had to know you exist, and isn't that true knowledge?
Yes, well,
Because in
Descartes is,
order,
oh, he's not
I'm
actually
sorry.
a skeptic.
Yeah, no, I was
Yeah.
just curious because if aren't the global skeptics wrong? Because you can at least know you exist, right? Because if I'm questioning anything, how can I not exist? Nothing
Yeah.
can't question something. I
Descartes,
have to exist.
yeah. So Descartes would say, yes, the global skeptics are wrong. Descartes can know at least one thing, and that is that he exists. Um, Others would say, no, Descartes, you can be mistaken about that. Those are the people like the no self theorists. Um, so early versions of this would be like David Hume, the Buddha. A little bit later, you get Nietzsche, and into the 20th century, you get like people like Derek Parfit, who would argue that this sort of sense of ourselves as whole persons, like as unified, continuously existing entities, is actually an illusion. Um, so I don't want to throw an extra wrench into the works, but yeah, Descartes would say the global skeptics are mistaken on the basis that he knows he exists as a thinking thing. But then others would say, no, Descartes, you can actually also be mistaken about that, right? Um, okay, so at what point does a skeptic fully believe in something? Well, skeptics believe in all kinds of things. They just aren't sure whether those beliefs count as knowledge, right? Is there an objective truth? Doesn't that remove skepticism? No, because the skeptic says, well, we might not actually, even if there is an objective truth, we can't know it, right? Um, yeah, what if they do send a person to space to see if there's aliens, but what if the astronaut is unconscious and could be dreaming that he's looking at aliens? Well, that's the worry, right? Diego's an extreme skeptic. Good job, Diego. Um, all right. Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah, professional devil's advocates. I mean, kind of like skeptics aren't, nowadays. This is why I mentioned, the sort of effect that like they call it the euphemism treadmill, right? Words change over time, and now skeptics are almost looked at as kind of like party poopers, right? A bit of a downer, right? I used to watch, you know, like uh, like those unsolved mysteries kinds of shows, right? Which are silly. I admit they're silly. They'll talk about a guy, maybe they'll have a guy on there who claims he was abducted by aliens or something, and he's got a really interesting story about how the aliens took him into their spaceship and everything. Um, and then they bring the skeptic on. And the way that it's edited always makes it look like the skeptic is, there's no aliens, they're just grumpy and don't believe in anything, right? Um, but originally, what the skeptics were concerned with is what, like, can we even have knowledge? Because we'd like knowledge, wouldn't we? It would be better to say that we know something than that we just believe it, right? Would a global skeptic assert that mathematical axioms aren't necessarily true? Yeah, I think they would. Uh, um, Descartes, as we'll see, formulates some of the strongest skeptical arguments there have ever been. And he doubts that kind of knowledge, right? That sort of a priori knowledge. Um, if one person experiences a certain experience, and due to this experience, he becomes the strong believer of a new belief. Is he the sole believer of this belief who is the skeptic? Um, like, hmm, trying to think of a concrete example. I guess, well, many people have experiences like this, right? Where maybe they claim to have encountered something anomalous. Um, like if saw a UFO, right? I mean, say I saw that UFO and no one else believes me. Well, those people would be skeptics in the sort of contemporary sense. They might also be skeptics in the philosophical sense. Um, yeah, math. Um, yeah, like a near-death experience, right? Those are what we call anomalous experiences. Anomalous means that it seems to violate certain laws, like the laws of nature, right? So, like I said, for a belief to count as knowledge, it has to be, at least on the received view, a well-justified true belief. This might not work in all cases, but let's go with it as a sort of working definition. So, like, I believe that it is sunny outside, right? That's a proposition. And I have this attitude of belief toward that proposition, which means I believe that it is true that it is sunny outside. For that to count as knowledge, the belief has to be true, which it seems like it is. And I've got to have good reasons for holding the belief. And I do. Like I'm right outside, I can look up and see the bright blue sky. And so we can say, yes, I know that it is sunny outside because I have a well justified true belief um, toward that proposition or of that proposition, right? Yeah, you can. Okay, so say you haven't experienced the same as everyone else. Well, hating a certain food before you try it, that's not really skepticism, right? Skepticism isn't about like or dislike. It's about whether a belief counts as knowledge, right? The chat is funny. I gotta say, this is the chattiest bunch of students I've had in this class in a good long while, which is a good thing. Both on here and in the Discord server, I'm really impressed with the discussion. It's nice. I like it. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about beliefs. What is a belief? Like what we believe all kinds of things. Yeah, there's a Discord. There's a link to join it in the helpful materials module on Brightspace and in the course outline. Okay, so um, what is a belief? I've kind of gestured at what a belief is. One way we can understand what a belief is that they are mental representations. Um, could be about the world, as I say on the slides here. Could be about any number of things within the world, like the weather, as I just said. Uh, okay, there's some interesting discussion in the chat. You can't refute definitions. For example, blue is objectively a color and it cannot be refuted by definition. Well, I mean, blue blue is what we call a quale. Um, blue is something a conscious subject experiences. So, yeah, we're going to do the inverted spectrum thought experiment at some point in this class, so maybe that's all I'll say about that for now. No, beliefs are not quite like theories. That's a good question. But beliefs aren't quite like theories. Theories might involve lots and lots of different beliefs, though. Yes. Like I'm glad there's a lot of discussion, but I don't want to run out of time. Um so mental representations. Wow, there's so many there's so much going on here. Mate. Maybe I'm too nice. Maybe I just need to no, I would never tell people to shut up. Um but what is a mental representation? Well, it's a way of representing the world and features within the world in a specific way, right? So what do I mean by mental representation? Um, well, let's use you're going to see a lot of coffee cup examples because I do love coffee. Look at this. What is this? It's a coffee cup, right? Are you looking am I looking directly at the coffee cup? Am I experiencing the coffee cup itself? When you look at it on the monitor, are you seeing the coffee cup itself? Now you can jump into the chat and tell me whether you think yes or no. And by the way, nobody ever apologize for asking questions, okay? I'm not the people that prosecuted Socrates, for goodness sake. In a way, I'm experiencing it. Lauren says no. Yeah, we're seeing an object. Yeah, we've called it a coffee cup, Pernille, but am I in direct sensory contact with it? Jacob, that's a good point. It could be tea. Samar, great. We are seeing pixels on a screen. Yeah, you are. And in the same way, like when I say, look at this coffee cup, you go, oh, that's a coffee cup, and you can identify it correctly as such. But you're not in direct sensory contact with it. You're seeing an image of a coffee cup on a screen. Likewise, I am experiencing a mental representation of the coffee cup, not the cup itself. And beliefs are a kind of mental representation. This we could call a perception of a coffee cup. But beliefs are also a sort of mental representation. So I perceive that there's a coffee cup on the table beside me. I believe on the basis of my perception that there is a coffee cup. And maybe I even reach out and take a sip and discover it's not coffee at all. It's tea. No, just kidding. It is coffee. But all of this is just to illustrate the idea that beliefs, perceptions, these are kinds of mental representations, which are the way that we mentally represent features of the world. Just go to the chat real quick. Well, I'm experiencing my perception of the cup, Jaden. It is actually just coffee. Testimony, by the way, can be a type of evidence, right? If I have a reputation as an honest person, which I think I'm honest, and I tell you that I am drinking coffee, that's enough for you to believe me. But maybe I'm a bit of a shady character, and you discover that I'm not drinking coffee at all. Um, I don't know what I would be drinking in its place. Let's say absinthe, right? So if I were a kind of shady character with a taste for I don't know, I don't even know what absinthe tastes like. I've heard it tastes kind of like black licorice. Um but if I had a sort of reputation for being dishonest, you might have more reason to doubt what I'm claiming is in the coffee cup. Well, so that's a good question, Jaden. Yeah, what changes the knowledge is also a propositional attitude. It's just that if my belief is well justified and true, then it counts as knowledge, right? Uh that's also a good observation, Timothy. Like, would a mental representation be how our brain processes our sensory experiences? That's part of it. Um, of course, this is very like contemporary. We know a lot about the brain now, that for example, thinkers like Descartes didn't. Um, Now, this is tricky. What goes on in the mind depends on what's happening in the brain, but we don't have to consider them as the same thing. Some people do, but we don't have to. So the mental representation is mental. But we could say that it's realized by processes that are going on in the brain. Well, Khalid, that's the problem, right? True beliefs represent the world the way it really is. So who is to determine how the world is and how they can be certain they correct? That's what the skeptic is worried about, right? Yeah, Jaden has it exactly right here. The point of skepticism is to sort out what can and cannot be defined well as knowledge. What can and cannot be defined as knowledge. Yeah, Jaden, that reminds me of a thought experiment called Leibniz's mill, which we'll probably talk about later on in the class. But since we're only on slide number 4, I better get moving. Um, as I mentioned earlier, you can also think of beliefs as a propositional attitudes. Again, a proposition is a statement about the way the world is, and it can be true or false. Um, and so if I have the attitude of belief, it's because I've adopted it towards, some proposition. So if I believe that it is raining, I believe that the proposition "it is raining" is true, that it describes what's going on in my immediate vicinity, right? Okay. Um, Now we're not going to solve this today, right? This is tricky stuff. Um, Identifying good epistemic standards is very difficult to do. And so a question that a skeptic might have is, how do you know that your epistemic standards guarantee that your beliefs represent the world the way it really is? So that's what skeptics are concerned about. What our epistemic standards are and how we apply them. So a lot of you guys were asking about that, right? Like, well, who determines what counts as knowledge? Who determines the way the world is? Exactly. That's what the skeptic is worried about. We're not going to answer those questions today, but we are going to sort of get familiar with why these are concerns for the skeptic, right? Now let's get on to René Descartes. So here's René Descartes right here. Lived from 1596 to 1650, and he is known as the father of modern philosophy in the European tradition. He's certainly not the father of all philosophy, but he's a pretty important figure. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, that's actually an easy one, the egg. Because there were eggs before there were chickens. If you trace the evolution of chickens all the way back, you'll eventually get to a life form that wasn't a chicken, but which still laid eggs. So it's the egg. Yeah. Well, the end goal. So Daniela's got a really good question here. What's the end goal for the skeptics? Like, what are they trying to prove? They're not trying to prove anything. Rather, they want to know whether we can know. Right? Does that make sense? They want to know whether knowledge is possible, and if it is, how do we know when we have it? That's what skeptics are concerned about. So, René Descartes, father of modern philosophy in the European tradition. He was born in France. He worked a good deal of his adult life in the Netherlands. And he's the initiator, again, in the modern tradition, of something that we call rationalism. Rationalism is the idea that knowledge comes from the intellect or the exercise of the intellect. And we'll illustrate this with some examples as we go. He was educated in theology at a Jesuit college. So the Jesuits are like they're the Society of Jesus, right? In the Catholic Church, they got all these orders and societies and stuff. Um, the Jesuits are like the Society of Jesus. I kind of think of them as like philosopher priests, right? They study, they pray, they do some missionary stuff, a little bit of everything, but they're very academic, right? Then he studied law when he went to university. And by the way, people went to university a lot earlier, in Descartes' day than they do now. I mean, most of you are probably around, I don't know, 17, 18, 19. If you went to university in Descartes' time, you probably would have been younger than that. Well, we want to know what we know, Braden. I mean, I get it. What's the point? What's the point of any of this? Is it important that we know things? It's important that we know things, right? Whether it's how to get to your class in university, um, how to save for your retirement, how to drive a car, or more shall we say primitive concerns like our ancient ancestors. For them, it was important to know how to light a fire, how to grow food, how to shelter from the weather. Knowing things is important. And so the skeptic wants to know if we can actually do that. So there's a lot of good questions in the chat, but in the interest of time, I need to go on, and hopefully some of your questions will answer themselves as we get through the material. Um, Descartes was very interested in natural philosophy. Now, natural philosophy, what the heck is that? Well, it's philosophy about the natural world, or what we would today call science. So science used to just be a part of philosophy. That's an interesting anecdote there for you. He's also very interested in mathematics. He invented the Cartesian plane. I mean, you're all fresh out of high school, most of you. Do you all remember the Cartesian plane, right? Where we have an X and a Y axis? Yeah, that's Descartes. That's Descartes who came up with that. Crumley tells us that Descartes was also the first person to explain how rainbows work. And he actually did experiments to kind of illustrate, how light is diffracted through raindrops in a rain cloud and results in a rainbow. So Descartes, today he's considered a philosopher, but in Descartes' time, there wasn't really much of a difference between philosophy and science. It was all being done by the same people, right? I think that's quite interesting. Um, and as one of you, I can't remember who, but one of you mentioned the dualism guy. Yeah, the dualism guy. He argued for substance dualism, where the mind and the body are two different kinds of substances. What is a substance? Don't worry about it. We're going to talk about that later in the course. Um, but basically, Descartes thought that um, the mind is a non-material, unextended thinking substance. The body is an extended substance, which means it takes up space, has matter. It doesn't think. Yeah, that's why most philosophers were also scientists or mathematicians. Science did start as a sub-branch of philosophy. That's natural philosophy. Yes, the slides are posted in Bright Space. Um, that's why if you pursue the highest level of study in any field, like let's say you go and you study, I don't know, biology, right? You get a bachelor's degree, then you get a master's degree, then you get a PhD. Congratulations. You're a scientist now. You're a doctor biologist. Who can tell me what PhD stands for? Yeah, doctorate of philosophy, from the Latin for philosophia doctore, which means teacher of philosophy. So that's a legacy of the sort of, you know the the fact that philosophy and science were really always, for a long time, the same thing. Even if you go and get a PhD in a science like a physics, biology, chemistry, that means teacher of philosophy. Um, so that's kind of cool. Descartes had some pretty interesting debates with Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia about the nature of the mind and body, which maybe we'll look at another time. He died relatively young. He was only 53 when he died. He was serving as the philosophy tutor to Queen Christina of Sweden. And Queen Christina really liked to do philosophy super early in the morning. Um, so Descartes got to get up and, I don't know, walk around this cold, damp castle in the wee hours of the morning, catches pneumonia and dies. Rather unfortunate. One thing that I think we really got to keep in mind here is that although Descartes offers some very interesting skeptical arguments, he is not himself a skeptic. Um, but he was interested in these skeptical arguments because he wanted to be as sure as possible. He wanted to know what it was possible to know with the greatest degree of certainty that he could. Um, so that brings us, sorry, I have to tie my shoe. That brings us to the meditations on first philosophy, which we're not reading here, but which are actually quite fun to read. In fact, you can read them for free on the internet. And if any of you in this class are also in my Minds and Machines first year seminar, um, well, I've made the readings available on Brightspace. So, yeah, do read the meditations if you're so inclined. They're a lot of fun. So anyway, he discounts some weaker skeptical arguments. and tries to formulate um, the the most solid, the most rigid skeptical arguments that he can, and then try to defeat those arguments. And the reason why he's doing this is because he wants to establish some kind of firm foundation for his knowledge, right? After all, and this is something I think Crumley is quite correct to emphasize. Um, Descartes' not just interested in his beliefs, he's interested in knowledge in the sciences, right? Descartes is working at a time when science was just starting to reveal that the world works a lot differently than it appears to us, right? Take, for example, the table that I'm sitting at. And this is again a more contemporary example, but it is discussed by Crumley. But take this table that I'm sitting at. It's solid, right? It's made of wood. So it appears to me as this solid, woody thing that I can sit by and put my computer on. But what's it really made of? I mean, it's made of wood, sure, but what's the wood made of? And now it's okay if you want to jump in the chat and tell me what picnic tables are made of in a more fundamental level of analysis than just wood. Yeah, atoms. Yeah, there's probably carbon, there's maybe a little water. That's right. Well, that I don't know if we could say they figured this out, but Democritus, yeah, he did. He was the first to propose this theory of atoms. Um, we could say that Democritus might have had a true belief, but did he know everything was made of atoms? Not really. Um, but yeah, the table is made of molecules of various chemical elements like carbon, and those are in turn made of atoms, and atoms are in turn made of quarks. And like one of you said, atoms are really mostly empty space. It's the electrical forces between the electron clouds that kind of make everything solid. So I have this experience of the table as this solid woody thing when on a more fundamental level of analysis, it's actually mostly empty space. So our senses are not showing us the way the world really is. And so Descartes wants to know how he can be sure how, in such a world where the senses don't reveal things as they really are, how can we have knowledge, right? That's not just about his beliefs. That's about like how do we even have knowledge in the sciences. So, um, let's look at his very famous arguments, the dream argument and the demon argument. The dream argument does two things for Descartes. It offers a skeptical argument concerning the senses, and it allows Descartes to show us how the senses do not reveal the world the way it really is, right? Now, Descartes is interested in for Descartes for a belief to count as knowledge, it has to be infallible. So a true belief is only knowledge if it's impossible for us to be mistaken about it, in the sense that the belief cannot be false. There are other criteria we could use too, right? Indubitability means there are no objective reasons to doubt the belief. Incorrigibility means it's impossible to show that a believer is mistaken, even if the belief is wrong. But what Descartes is actually interested in is infallibility. In the Meditations, he actually uses indubitability as the word, but it seems like what he's talking about is infallibility. Yeah, so I'm getting a couple questions about where everything is on Brightspace, which I did cover in the first lecture. But yeah, Brightspace. The slides are all on Brightspace. Um, if you found the link to join this lecture, well, good job. And also, the slides are posted on the same module. So it's all there. And then, of course, links to the recorded lectures are going to be posted there too. By the way, sometimes it might take a while for me to upload the lecture to YouTube, but it will be done within 48 hours of class. And if you ever click on the link to a recorded lecture and it takes you to a page where there's no video, just wait, because chances are the video is being uploaded or it's still processing. But I put the link there anyway. So Descartes is looking for these reasons to doubt that the senses provide an accurate representation of the world. This would show that it's possible that the senses mislead us about the nature of the world. So what he's trying to do with the dream argument is give us reasons to be skeptical of our what we could call sensory beliefs or perceptual beliefs, beliefs that we form on the basis of what we sense and what we perceive. So the channel is, yeah, somebody's put it there. Thank you, Zane. This is all in the course outline, by the way, which I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this is why we reviewed it for the first class, and this is why you should also probably review it a couple of times, even though we reviewed it together, right? Because everything you need to know is in that course outline. And if I get emails like, Professor, where do I find the PowerPoints? I'm not answering those emails, guys. Like, I don't have time for that. It's all in the course outline. Um, Okay, so why should we be skeptical of our perceptual beliefs or our sensory beliefs? Well, one reason, and this is kind of what the dream argument turns on, is that sense experience when we're awake and dream experiences have a lot of features in common with one another. But we know that dream experiences are not trustworthy. So we have sense experiences in dreams, but dreams are not trustworthy. Dreams, if I am having a dream that I'm sitting here lecturing, that's being caused by something internal to me, not by anything outside of me, right? So if I'm awake, my experience of the coffee cup is caused by the coffee cup, right? But if I'm dreaming, then maybe it's just a memory or an expectation or something that causes me to experience a coffee cup. Uh, I'm not sure what you mean. Um, yeah, you need to. Are you opening with PowerPoint or? Yeah, don't use the reader on Brightspace. Download them or use the PDFs. Um, this is how Margaret Wilson summarized Descartes' dream argument. She wrote, for the first premise, I believe in the past, I have dreamed that I was perceiving various physical objects at close range, when it was false that I was really perceiving any such objects. So, in the past, her experiences were thoroughly delusory. Something that it's impossible to be mistaken about. Well, whether there is such a thing depends maybe on how skeptical you are, right? But I don't know. It's impossible to believe that somewhere out there is a married bachelor, right? Why? Well, because bachelors are unmarried, like by definition. For Descartes, his infallible belief was that he exists. Cogito ergo sum, right? So that's where we're getting to. So, right. In the past, I've dreamed that I was perceiving objects when it was false. Premise two, if I see no certain marks to distinguish waking experience of physical objects from dream experience when I believe, when I believe I was deceived, I have no reason to believe my waking experience too may be deceptive. And premise three, I see no such certain marks to distinguish wakings from dreams. Therefore, I have reason to suppose that waking experience too may be deceptive. And if I have reason to suppose my waking experience may be deceptive, I have reason to doubt the existence of physical objects. That all of this exists around me. These trees, this table, could all be a dream. It depends on the skeptic, Rama. Right? Because remember, there are global skeptics which say that there's no such thing as knowledge at all. None of our beliefs count as knowledge. But a Pyrrhonian skeptic might say, no, we can have knowledge, but you need to withhold your judgment about whether a proposition counts as knowledge until it's completely evident that it does, right? So it really depends on what school of skepticism you adhere to. So why are we doubting dream experiences? Well, we doubt our dream experiences because the objects that we experience in dreams don't match the real cause of the experience, right? So if I'm awake, there is an object in the world, this coffee cup, which causes me to have an experience of that coffee cup, right? Light shines on it, reflects into my retina. A bunch of neurons start firing in my visual cortex. And after a whole bunch of really complicated stuff happens in the brain, I come to have a conscious experience of perceiving this coffee cup, right? And that's caused ultimately by there being a real coffee cup out there in the world. But it's not like that with dreams. With dreams, the causes are internal to us. Dreams are offline experiences, if you like, as opposed to online experiences. What I mean by that is when I have an online experience, I'm hooked up to the world via my senses. When I'm dreaming, I'm not. So Descartes is saying that the objects in dreams, unlike the objects like this coffee cup, are not what cause the experiences. They don't match the real causes of the experience. But we often don't see we don't have any means of distinguishing whether we're dreaming or awake. So we have to assume that it's possible that our experiences when we're awake uh, don't match the real causes of those experiences too. That's the point. Well, it is, that's a good thing. A good point you raised there. What is real and what is a dream? A question of neuroscience. Can we not match brain states to when we are dreaming and when we are not, defining dreaming as a certain brain state? Sure, we could. Um, But remember, Descartes doesn't have neuroscience. Descartes does not live at a time when there are brain scanners and so forth. And also, the questions that are occupying Descartes are prior to the questions of a neuroscientist. You can only go and do science if you agree that knowledge is possible. And Descartes is trying to work out whether knowledge is possible. So what Descartes is doing is more fundamental than, scanning brains to see if we're awake or we're dreaming, right? That's what I meant last time when I said that philosophy is about asking fundamental questions. A lot of the questions that philosophers deal with are actually prior to scientific questions. You can only do science if you think knowledge is possible, right? And that's what Descartes is interested in, whether knowledge is possible. Yeah, like a pre-scientist. Yeah, Plato's allegory of the cave is similar to Descartes' dream argument in some respects. Um, uh, what's the point of him proving that? Well, like I said, um, uh, Descartes wants to know if knowledge is possible, right? That's his whole thing here. And so he formulates the dream argument, one of the strongest skeptical arguments he can, in order to knock it down. Do we have reasons ourselves to doubt the dream argument? We come to doubt dream experiences because of the senses, after all, right? I realize that I was dreaming and not really awake because I've woken up and realized I was dreaming, right? Maybe I had a dream I was water skiing, right? And I'm thinking, wow, this is really great. Water skiing rules. But then I wake up. I'm like, oh, I wasn't really water skiing because I've been in bed. My senses revealed that I'm just waking up in my bed. So it must have been a dream, right? But this doesn't work. Why? Well, it would be circular to use the senses to verify the veracity of the senses. That would be a circular argument, right? If I say to you, I don't know if I can trust my sense experience, I think it might be unreliable. You wouldn't then say to me, don't worry, we can figure this out. We just have to use our senses. Well, that would be circular because the reliability of my senses is what is in question. I can't use sense experience to show that sense experience reliably and accurately represents the world because that is the very question at issue. So that's a circular argument. And whenever we get a circular argument in philosophy, that means that something's gone amiss. So there really are, for Descartes, no guarantees about whether our senses can tell us um, the way the world is. So this is enough for him to rule out the claim that knowledge comes from sense experience. This is what makes him a rationalist, by the way. Rationalists think that knowledge does not come from the senses, but rather knowledge comes from the exercise of the intellect. We will meet other philosophers who disagree. Next time, we're going to talk about David Hume. David Hume was an empiricist. Empiricists believe knowledge does come from the senses. But Descartes says no. Knowledge doesn't come from the senses. It can't, because the senses just don't represent reality the way it really is. So now he's shown why we should doubt our sense experience. But what about other things like rational beliefs, a priori knowledge, right? Beliefs like 2 plus 2 equals 4, or a belief that all bachelors are unmarried, or that all triangles have 3 sides. These are rational beliefs. They're true by definition. You don't have to go out and check, right? Um, I don't have to find every triangle in the universe, count up its sides and its internal angles to know that triangles have 3 sides. Because triangles are definitionally 3-sided polygons. I don't need to go find every bachelor on the planet Earth and check if he is unmarried. Because what it is to be a bachelor is to be an unmarried man, right? So these things are just definitionally true. These are examples of a priori knowledge, knowledge that we can have prior to sense experience. It's not like a posteriori knowledge, right? Empirical knowledge where you have to use your senses. If I want to know what color the apples at the grocery store are, I should go and check. They might be green, they might be red. They might be green and red. They might be pink. I don't know. I won't know until I go and look. Right? So that's an example of an a posteriori belief. Um, and we've seen why we can doubt, at least for Descartes, why we can doubt a posteriori beliefs. It's because we come to those beliefs via the senses, and the senses are not trustworthy. It's not because the senses deceive us sometimes. It is because they just don't reveal the world the way the world is. Yes, briefly, we will look at Kant. Briefly. Can we doubt rational beliefs? Well, Descartes says yes, we can. I mean, but really prepare yourselves, okay? Because like Descartes is about to claim, no, actually, you could doubt that triangles have three sides. You could doubt that bachelors are unmarried. How? How could you doubt a priori beliefs? Well, maybe you've seen that movie, The Matrix, right? Actually, have you? Who's seen it? Who hasn't? Oh boy, chat's blown up. Okay, good. A lot of people have, a lot of people haven't. Okay, so what you need to do if you haven't seen it is you need to see that movie. Um, don't worry about all the sequels. I mean, the sequels are all right, but that first movie was like really something, right? And it's so cool. It's an awesome movie. I think it's mid. Oh no, Ryan, no. No, no. You need to watch it with an appreciation for what you're watching. What you're basically watching when you watch The Matrix is an illustration of Plato's cave, as well as Descartes, as well as elements of Descartes' dream argument and demon argument. So I don't want to spoil it, but so for those who haven't seen it, but imagine something like what's happening in the Matrix, where everybody's imprisoned, in this sort of virtual reality. Descartes has a similar scenario in mind. There might be an evil genius or a demon which can cause us to experience anything it wants, and further, which can mislead us about things which would otherwise seem obvious, right? I haven't, but the Truman Show um, is also a good illustration of Plato's cave. In fact, I've had students write essays on these movies. Um, so if you're thinking of essay ideas and you want to discuss a philosophical film, The Matrix and The Truman Show are both really good choices for that. Okay, so Neo, this guy, Keanu Reeves, right? He's living in the Matrix, and he thinks it's the real world. But eventually, he's awakened by Morpheus, right? Who tells him about the true nature of reality. Now, just as the machines can make Neo and everybody in the Matrix believe all sorts of falsehoods, this evil genius could make us believe all kinds of falsehoods. It could make us believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5. It could make us believe that there are married bachelors, or it could make us believe in a four-sided triangle, right? Nicholas.
Okay, I'm having a little bit of difficulty wrapping my head around this, specifically because the Matrix to me seems like an example of the previous argument, of the dream argument. Because when Neo escapes the Matrix is a false, it shows that our senses are not reliable.
Mhm.
Not specifically that things like 2 plus 2 equals 4 could not be reliable. Because things like those concepts seem to be consistent across the false reality in the Matrix and the true
Yeah,
reality.
yeah, you're not.
Um,
Yeah, you're not wrong. Like I said, it has elements of both. It's like the dream argument and also like the brain in the vat argument in the sense that the machines deceive people in the Matrix about the nature of reality. But it's also like the evil demon argument in the sense that the machines can make us believe various things, including, and I don't want to get too spoilery here, including the prophecy of the one, right? So, there are limits to the analogy, but also this is kind of just an excuse to talk about the Matrix. I hope you understand. Um, okay. Lots of film. Is there a period we could watch this together? Uh, I don't know. That might be difficult. Yeah, well that okay, Safula, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This is good. Yeah, this is Safi, thank you. Yeah, this is Aristotle's laws of identity, right? That you're highlighting. How could it be doubted? Well, the evil demon is that powerful. I mean, Descartes actually got himself into a bit of trouble with this. So we have 5 minutes left. I'll try to explain as much as I can. Yeah, Descartes gets into trouble. Remember, Descartes is educated at a Jesuit college. When he writes the Meditations, he dedicates it to the theology faculty at the Sorbonne. Um, because in the Meditations, he raises the possibility that God could be a deceiver. But he doesn't run with it. He says, like, well, God could be a deceiver. God is infinitely powerful, so he could make me believe that 2 + 2 = 5. Like, God could do that if he wanted to. God is so powerful, he could make me believe that triangles have 4 sides. But God is not a deceiver. So therefore, he supposes that instead of God, it's this evil genius who's doing it. That's how powerful this evil genius is. It still got him in trouble. That's why he was working in the Netherlands, and the Catholic Church actually banned some of his books just for saying, like, oh, God could deceive me if he wanted to, but let's imagine there isn't a God, but instead an evil genius. Oh boy, that got him in trouble, right? Canceled. So that's how powerful the demon is. And here's how Crumley sketches the demon argument. He says, I have some beliefs that are compelling for the first premise. Second premise, it is possible that an evil demon intent on deceiving me could be the causal source of these beliefs. If the origin of the beliefs is sufficiently deviant, then the beliefs are false. So, I might be caused by this demon to believe that triangles actually have 4 sides. But because this demon is so deviant, my beliefs will be false. I can't rule out the evil demon scenario, so it's possible that the origin of all of my beliefs is sufficiently deviant for them all to be false. So it's possible that all my beliefs are false, and thus I do not know. Now, where does that leave us? Maybe we'll finish off on this slide. The beginning of the second meditation, this is what Descartes says. He says, I was persuaded that there was nothing in all the world, that there was no heaven, no earth, that there were no minds nor any bodies. Was I not then likewise persuaded that I did not exist? Not at all. Of a surety I myself did exist, since I persuaded myself of something. But there is some deceiver or other, very powerful and very cunning, who employs his ingenuity on deceiving me. Then without doubt I exist also, if he deceives me, and let him deceive me as much as he will. He can never cause me to be nothing so long as I think that I am something. We must come to this definite conclusion. I exist, is necessarily true each time that I pronounce it or mentally conceive it. And that's the cogito from Latin, cogito ergo sum. I am, I exist, or sometimes I think, therefore I am. This is probably the most famous line in all of Western philosophy. And what it means is that even if Descartes can't be sure whether he's dreaming or awake, or even if this evil genius is deceiving him about the nature of his a priori or rational beliefs, there's one thing that Descartes can never doubt, and that is that he exists. Because even if this demon is deceiving it about everything, the demon could not deceive Descartes into thinking that he doesn't exist. So that's the one thing he can be certain about. I think, therefore I am. I exist is true whenever I assert it or think it. That's what that means. Um, I don't know, Khalid. Maybe. It certainly doesn't have to be the case that he was poisoned. And besides, the Catholic Church, no offense to any Catholics, the Catholic Church doesn't need to secretly poison anybody. Okay? The Catholic Church is powerful enough that if they want you, they will get you, and they will do it in a big way, like, or at least at the time, right? Like this is, this is just after the Inquisition too, right? Um, uh, Descartes, or not even just after, during, in some places, Descartes' friend and contemporary Galileo was sentenced to house arrest um, for pronouncing that celestial bodies orbited other celestial bodies besides the Earth. Right? The Catholic Church didn't need to be sneaky. Um, yeah, that's right. There is a worry here. That's the no self people, right, that I mentioned. Now, that's just about it. We're all done. I thought we'd be able to finish, but we didn't. But that's okay. We'll finish these slides next time. I'll see you all on Thursday. We'll finish up Descartes and we're going to talk about Hume. Laters.